by the law for the pupil and strives to fulfill it. Our second guest speaker is Emma Natalie, who is practicing physician associate in the San Francisco Bay Area. Currently, she specializes in geriatrics and with experience in occupational medicine and orthopedics. Um, for Emma, the ability to improve a person's quality of life is the most rewarding aspect of her profession. And our last speaker is Dr. Iqbal Mirza, who's a long-term Bay Area resident and currently has an outpatient anesthesia practice, as well as works a few ICU shifts at the Regional Medical Center. He has a son and daughter-in-law, along with their 5 children that live with him in the West Valley area. So we're going to first hand it over to Dr. Aisha Hamid to start us off. Hello?
Okay. So it's great to be here. It's an honor. Thanks for inviting me. Thanks, Stephanie, for arranging everything. I see some familiar faces, so welcome today. So just a little bit about, the path that I went to get to being an attending physician today. And talk a little bit about that. Again, if you guys have any questions, just feel free to ask me. So my name's Aisha Amin. I am currently an internal medicine physician at Sutter Health. I've been working there for about 3 years now almost. I love the work that I do there. On weekends, I also work as a hospitalist, but primarily I'm a primary care physician. On a personal level, I have 2 kids. I have another one coming. So it's, also every career is about, being a woman is like juggling both of those together. And I think that the kind of work that I do sometimes is challenging, sometimes it's very doable. So my path to medicine is it's probably going to be a little bit different compared to a lot of the students or the college students here that graduate. I was an international medical graduate, originally from Pakistan. I did my medicine over there in Karachi. And then I came here after I got married, and then I did my and then that's how I got into I took a start. So, the challenges of being a college student and, thinking about why medicine, for some people it's very clear. For some people, it's a little bit of a struggle. Do I want to do this? Do I not want to do that? So for me, my sisters were also in the medical field, so I had some guidance there. As a child, you always look up to leadership roles. When you're a little kid, you want to be a teacher because that's what you see. As you grow older, being in medicine, that's also a pretty leadership role. And, I think that's what intimidated me and got me into medicine to start with. Then, just to be sure I was doing what I wanted to do, I did some social work here and there, worked in hospitals, just being there with patients, seeing what doctors do. And I was really sure, that that's what I wanted to do. But, society is always like, you can't get into medicine unless if you have the best score. It said you need to have all A's. You need to, ace it in your SAT. It wasn't really like that for me. When I did my O-levels, I got a couple of B's, and then when I got into A-levels, got a couple of C's too. But and then I got into medicine. Once I got into medicine, it was pretty smooth sail from there. There was no peer pressure. You got to be the best. So, but I worked hard throughout medicine. When medicine was over, it came the USMLE time, which people said, yes, again, time to ace that test. Obviously tried really hard at every step. But again, the expectation is step 1, you got to get a 260. If you don't, it's all over. It wasn't really like that for me. I got a 235 and I was like, fine, let's try. Some people were like, oh, that's not good enough. Or like, okay, let's keep moving. Step 2 came, like, okay, I didn't make it for step 1. Step 2, I really got to hit it there, get a 260 to compensate. Got a 228 and I did it, but kept moving on. Eventually, over here then I came to apply to residency, and I felt like, yes, challenges where I had to
apply a little bit fine being an international graduate, but still wasn't that hard. I got into residency. When I got into residency, I also had my first baby at that time. That's what made residency pretty challenging. You know, it was always childcare, you know, work it all the time. You're like, okay, who's going to take care of my baby today? Who's going to take care of my baby tomorrow? But we got through it. I think that was the most challenging part about residency is, you know, just struggling with my 2-year-old, my 1-year-old at that time. So, but, you know, residency, we had to move to New York. I think that was another challenge. We had to, you know, we used to live in California. We wrapped up. We moved to New York. Over there, living in the city was a challenge. I was at work most of the time. My kid, you know, just doing another, you know, struggling also without me, with him without me. And then 3 years it passed by. COVID hit. COVID was, I guess, the biggest hurdle. That was my last year. And I think that I was glad it was my last year. I couldn't handle COVID for another, you know, any longer. So that was a little challenge. When COVID hit, we had to work harder. There was always the concern about family members getting sick. With my in-laws, they were older, you know. Anyway, that also passed by. The goal was to come back to California, apply for jobs here, and then that's where I ended up in my first job, which is internal medicine at Sutter Health. Now, yeah, so up until residency, I would say was a little bit of a struggle, some hiccups here and there, but then after that, everything just became very doable. You know, then working hours aren't that bad. It's like 9 to 5, you can work part-time, you can work full-time. So alhamdulillah, it was pretty rewarding after, you know, starting my current job. And initially it felt a little weird, you know, what, I have Saturdays and Sundays off, that feels a little weird. But, you know, eventually, you know, I had my second kid, now on to my third one, but, you know, alhamdulillah, things are better. In terms of, you know, what medicine is like as a mom, I think, you know, once you get past the initial training phase, it becomes much easier. At whatever point that you are in your life, whether you are studying to get into undergrad or, you know, in undergrad or studying for your USMLEs, I would just say keep trying, you know, even if you feel like you didn't do as well as you were told you had to, you know, just keep trying, because eventually, you know, it's not as bad as people, it's not as hard as people make it seem. So yeah, that is a little bit of, you know, intro of my struggles, and yeah, I will pass on the mic to.
Can you hear me now? Okay, great. Hi, salam everyone. My name is Amani. I'm a physician associate here in the South Bay area. A little bit about my early educational years. I did my 4 years of high school. Pre-high school, so I've lived in Louisiana. So I recently relocated to the Bay Area. So I'm very familiar with the southern area of the country. I went to Louisiana State University in Shreveport and majored in cellular and molecular biology. Was in various medical honor societies, Alpha, Epsilon, Delta, which were also very good things that were listed on my resume to help with my applications. Once I graduated from LSUS, I went to the University of Arkansas for medical sciences. In Little Rock, Arkansas, I went to their physician assistant program. Started in 2019. I graduated in 2021. My program was about 28 months. The first 13 months were in didactic, getting hands-on experience in the classroom, learning skills, and learning a lot of the book education, the textbook knowledge. The remaining months of the program were very hands-on, very rotation oriented. It was a lot of rounding, a lot of late nights, early mornings. We did surgeries. We also did various procedures, surgery, primary care, women's health, dermatology, various specialties. So I graduated in 2021. I worked my first job in sports medicine orthopedics when I moved back to Louisiana. I worked at Minden Medical Center doing sports medicine and helping on surgeries as well. So a lot of my experience was with high school and college athletes, as well as the general population that were dealing with problems such as arthritis, any fractured bones, things like that. So I did that for a while, and then I transplanted to the Bay. I have a husband that works at Apple, so that was my biggest reason for coming here. But now I currently work in geriatrics, skilled nursing facilities around the Bay Area, a lot of post operation management, as well as dealing with the geriatric population as well. For my parental support, my parents were very supportive of my journey. They came with me to my interviews, helped me prep with questions, and would even help when you're feeling stressed to just kind of joke around and just kind of help with the interview process, because that part can be very challenging and stressful, but you will get through it if you get there, inshallah. It will be very worth it. The biggest challenges that I could say you would face upon the journey would be getting shadowing experience if you're in a smaller town, kind of where I'm from. But mashallah, the Bay Area is very big. There's a lot of providers that are very open to helping with that. So I think that would be very helpful. And another thing is too, depending on your school work-life balance, getting the shadowing hours and the community service hours that your application requires. My application process was, I got most of my shadowing hours and my patient contact hours from working in a nonprofit, low-income, no insurance clinic for patients that did not have any insurance coverage. We would help with basic primary care as well as medication management as well. So that was where I got most of my patient care from. I graduated college and went directly into PA school. A lot of people that do go to PA school will take a different route and work for a while to gain experience, to make their application stronger, and take the GRE if that's still required for their school, and then apply. But I just pushed through and went directly in. Another thing is, the greatest thing that I like about being a physician associate is the work-life balance and the flexibility. The flexibility meaning that as a PA, you can switch specialties whenever you would like to. And it's not required for you to go back into a residency program or go back to school, depending on your job requirements. So for example, when I worked in sports medicine orthopedics, I did not have to do an ortho residency after. There are programs around the country that do offer residencies for emergency medicine to strengthen your experience, but it is not a requirement. So after my 28 months of school, I was able to find a job. There's always a demand for healthcare because there's always a shortage and there's always a demand. So finding a job was not very difficult. But the only thing I would say is that if you are very passionate about one specialty, you might have to look a little bit harder depending on what your specialty is. If you are flexible and willing to gain experience in a specific field, strengthen your application, and then apply to another job, that's something that people do. But for the most part, I did a lot of school for about 6.5 years, graduated, and now I'm working in my skilled nursing facilities in geriatrics. I also did work occupational medicine, urgent care, any injuries that happen on the job, manage those, as well as urgent care, any acute injuries that happen as well. The biggest thing is, I would say, is to just be confident in yourself. You know more than you think you know, and don't be afraid to ask questions because you will not know the answer unless you ask those questions. And it's a learning experience. Everything is a learning opportunity. You will make mistakes, and that's okay. That's just life. So you just have to kind of learn to just kind of smile through your mistakes and learn that it is okay. And you're human at the end of the day, and it's all just a learning opportunity.
Assalamu alaikum. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammadin. Mubarak wa sallam. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahdlul 'uqdatan yafqahu qawli. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. من أجل ذلك كتبنا على بني إسرائيل أنه من قتل نفسا بغير نفس أو فساد في الأرض فكأنما قتل الناس جميعا ومن أحياها فكأنما أحيا الناس جميعا. Allah says in the Quran in Surah Ma'idah, Ayat 32, because of that we ordained for the children of Israel that if anyone killed a person not in retaliation of murder, or because they were spreading mischief in the land, it would be as if they killed all of mankind. And if anyone saved a life, it would be as he saved the life of all of mankind. So this is kind of where I wanted to start and share an experience with you first, give you a story, and then, mashallah, my two sisters here highlighted very beautifully their career paths. Mine's a little bit different. I'll share that with you as well. So when I went to make my first Hajj many, many years ago, they did not require a meningitis vaccine. So that's how long ago it was. So my wife and I, we went, and we were living in Florida at the time. And alhamdulillah, we did the Hajj with one of my friends who lived in Saudi. And one of our friends from Orlando was also there, but they had made their own arrangements. And on the return, we get to the Jeddah airport. And there's a man walking around the airport asking people, "Are you Dr. Mirza? Are you Dr. Mirza?" And I'm like, there's thousands of people in here. And he came up to me and asked me that. And I said, "Yes, but you're probably looking for somebody else." He said, "Do you have friends from Florida?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, they're downstairs in the medical clinic. They want you to come down there." So I went down there, and sure enough, it was our friends from Florida. And the wife, who was approximately my wife's age at that time, was sick. She had a fever, complaining about a sore throat. So the airport doctor was not interested in letting her board the flight. He wanted to keep her there, feeling that she was unsafe to travel. And her husband, who was very insistent, wanted her to get on the plane. But he was taking a different flight coming back to the US. And she was going to be entrusted to our care. And so we said, okay, that's what's going to be. So she couldn't even walk to the gate, to the door. And so we pushed her on the wheelchair, we got her on the plane, and the plane takes off from Jeddah airport. She's sitting a couple rows in front of my wife and I. And after they serve breakfast, the air hostess comes to me and she says, "Your friend up there needs something. She's anxious, she's not behaving well." So I go up there, take a look at her, and I said, "What's the matter?" She's not answering me. Her legs, are Islamic women. Muslim women, mashallah, they have an adab. They have a way of sitting in the plane, and her hijab would come off, and her feet were in the aisleway and everything else. And she didn't respond to me. And so I evaluated her, and I asked the air hostess, I need to lay her down. She can't sit in this chair anymore. We were in economy. I said, "Do you have any empty seats in business or first class where she can lay down?" They said no, and if we did, they're reserved for the crew. I said, "Okay, where can I lay her down?" They said, "Well, you can lay her down in the galley where they prepare the meals." I said, "Okay." So subhanAllah, I had my sleeping bag. I don't know why I had a sleeping bag, but I brought it on the plane. And so I went and got that, laid that in the galley, and mashallah, 300 something Hajis on the plane, and not one of them helped me lift her and put her in the galley. That was an experience. So I evaluated her, examined her, and I determined that she had meningitis. All right. And then so I told the air hostess, I said, "Where's your medical kit?" And so she said, how do I know you're a doctor? She wouldn't even respond to my request. So I showed her we have a miniature diploma card in my wallet. So I showed her that. So she went and gets the kit, opens it up, and there is nothing of value for this patient, for this friend of ours. I said, okay. So now the journey is still about 12 hours from there to get to New York. And meningitis, if any of you know a little bit about that, it's can be very deadly, usually within 4 to 6 hours. So I told the air hostess, I said, she's not going to make it, and we'll have to stop somewhere. And she said, okay, you have to go talk to the pilot. So this was pre-911. And so she took me up to the cockpit. The Pakistani pilot was there, and he said, what's the issue? So I explained to him. He says, teach me about this disease. So I taught him. And then he said, what's the sequelae here? I said, well, the sooner the treatment, the better. He said, Athens is an hour away, Rome is 2.5, and London is 4. I said, well, you have to stop in Athens then. So he got permission to land. He had to dump so much fuel in the air because 747, when it takes off, it weighs almost 800,000 or 900,000 pounds. But the landing gear can only handle 500,000. So they had to dump all this fuel in the air, and they got permission to land. And when we landed in Athens, then we had to get clearance because they were all worried about who and why we were landing there. And so after we landed, and then the plane stayed on the ground, and I got off with her because her husband entrusted her to us. So I called for an ambulance. They called an ambulance there, and they took us to a county or a government hospital. And we got there, and they basically ignored us for like a half hour, 45 minutes. Everybody's just walking around, not doing anything. So finally, I went up to somebody that was wearing a white coat, assuming he was a doctor. So I grabbed him by his lapel. I said, we need to get this and this antibiotic and an IV in her right now. She's going to die right here. And she's comatose. She's totally out of it. She has no awareness of what's happening. And he just like jumped up and he went and got that stuff. And we did the LP. Sure enough, it was pus coming out. Got the antibiotics. Within an hour, mashallah, she woke up. All right, so alhamdulillah. So that was a way of saving a life. And she had just had a baby about 10 months ago that was waiting for her in New Jersey. So medicine is a calling. It's very important. It's a great field. And alhamdulillah, if you are honored as I've been honored to serve humanity, then inshallah that'll be good for you. I came to this country when I was a young boy. So I'm not even first generation. And my parents came here from India for the purposes of education of their children. And I'm one of 7. I'm the second youngest. And so I grew up in San Francisco. And alhamdulillah, my parents were very focused on us getting educated. And so I was able to go to Lowell High School, which is a magnet school in San Francisco. From there, I went to Berkeley. And during my time at Berkeley, I did some research, some basic science research looking at pseudocholinesterases. And then I did some lab research looking at rat brains, what they would do in various environments, and working with one of the neuroanatomists over there on that. So those are a couple of the projects that I did. I majored in physiology and graduated cum laude from there and applied to medical school. I went to medical school in North Carolina, Wake Forest Medical School, and completed my 4 years there. And while I was there, I thought I wanted to be a surgeon. And so during one of my 4th year rotations, I went up to Mass General to do a pediatric surgery rotation because I love kids. So I wanted to do that. So I went there, spent a month there, and after about 3 weeks, I said, this is not my calling. These guys are working way too hard. It was like every other night call, 36, 38 hours straight. I'd go back to my dorm room. I was just renting a room over there because I left my wife in San Francisco with my parents. And every other night, and then one night at 1 in the morning, I got this epiphanic moment. I said, like, what am I doing here? You know, I was couldn't keep my eyes awake and I couldn't stand on my feet, holding the retractors, and this surgeon was a workaholic. So it was good for him, but not good for me. So I looked over the ether screen, I saw the anesthesiologist, and he's sitting there and he's calculating dosages, he's thinking, looks pretty chill. I said, that's what I want to do. And so I made a decision, that's what I wanted to do at that point. But now I was already in my 4th year. I only had 1 week of experience in anesthesia, 30 minutes. And I said, I don't want to make my life decision based on that. So I said, okay, I'll do an internal medicine internship. And then while I did that, I asked for a month of elective time to do anesthesia. Well, the first month, 2 of my co-residents quit. It was so stressful that they quit the medicine residency. So then they said, everybody's losing their rotations, everybody has to stay on the wards. I thought, okay, great. And then my year was coming to an end, and they said, do you want to stay for a 2nd year of medicine? I said, only if you allow me to do my rotation, my elective early on, so I can apply for anesthesia, because I really don't want to finish this residency. They said, okay. So they, alhamdulillah, got me in, I think like in September or October. I did a month of anesthesia. I really liked it. I applied to the University of Florida, and they accepted me. And so alhamdulillah, at that point now, I had completed 2 years of medicine. And then I said, well, it's a shame to leave after 2 years because I don't really have anything to show for it. You're not board eligible, you don't have board certification, nothing. So I looked into some of these loopholes, and one of the loopholes was that if you complete 30 months of clinical internal medicine, and then you go into another field like anesthesia, those 6 months will count towards the 3 years of board eligibility for internal medicine. So I did 2.5 years of internal medicine, and then I bolted for University of Florida to start my anesthesia residency, which was 2 years at that time. So 6 months of my anesthesia counted towards my medicine. Long story short, I got my boards in both internal medicine and anesthesia in 4.5 years. Practiced in Florida for about 10 plus years, and that's where we met our friends that we went to Hajj with. And one day, playing golf with one of my friends, I had another moment where I said, okay, I was planning to do a critical care fellowship. And I said, I better do it now. It's been a long time. I haven't been doing any residency or anything, so I better do it now. So I decided to apply and applied to Stanford, got in, did an ICU fellowship over there many years ago, and then decided to stay in the Bay Area after that. So that's kind of my journey. So along the way, I want to credit my parents who have passed away, because if it wasn't for my mom, when I was in 8th grade, she said, what are you going to do? I said, well, I want to be an engineer. I love bridges, buildings, all that stuff. And I was good at math. I was good at science. She says, no. She says, your brother, my older brother, was going to be an engineer, and he became an industrial engineer. She said, you be a doctor. I said, okay, Mom. Listen to your parents, number one, okay? So they make dua for you, and inshallah, you'll be successful. And then the second thing is that graduating from medical school, our med school did something really very unique. They gave not only me a diploma, but they also gave a diploma to my wife and to my parents. And it's not called PhD, but it's called PhT, putting him or her through. And so they each got a diploma. Because, it's a real sacrifice. So you have to understand that as budding doctors, as budding students, etc., that your parents, your family are all sacrificing. And I'm the first one in my family, and so far I think I'm the only one in my family that has gone into medicine. And so it's a huge sacrifice, a lot of work, not only for yourself, but for them, financially, as well as other things that they have to do in order to take care of you and everything else. So that's kind of what it is. Now, as far as what I do now, I basically, during the week, I stopped night call. I don't do that anymore. I do that for many, many years. So I work daytime at outpatient surgery centers. I have a small group of docs that help me out. So we provide anesthesia for them. About 60-70% of our patients are there for orthopedic procedures like rotator cuff, ACLs, etc. About 25% are there for hernias, gallbladder removals, and then some NT surgery that we do. So that's primarily what we do as an outpatient. Some weekends I work at Regional Medical Center where I'm on staff as an intensivist, and I do ICU shifts over there on the weekend just to keep up those skills. So alhamdulillah, part of the ICU training came in really handy. As you know, we had COVID, and everybody was short-staffed. And alhamdulillah, I put in a lot of hours. Some weekends I go there every weekend, every Saturday, Sunday, every weekend in the month. And there were, sometimes I had 15, 16 COVID patients under my care. And so this is what you're looking at the future, because you don't know when the next pandemic is going to come, when the next whatever is going to happen. It might be a nuclear disaster, Allah save us all. It might be some other kind of disaster. But this is what your training, inshallah, will prepare you for in order to be able to handle those kind of situations. And alhamdulillah, I've been blessed. I also went to India and did an IMRC medical mission over there, where we went to Jahangirabad, where the JIT Institute is, and they had patients, mashallah, they walk 100 miles because they wanted to come and see a doctor who was trained in America. And these people have nothing. And some days we saw like 30, 40 patients, give them free medications, treat them, and the next day we do the same thing. And then we went to Gujarat, to Anand, where the site of the 2002 riots, and took care of people over there as well. So alhamdulillah, you know, I'm kind of the dinosaur. I'm kind of the tail end of my career. And so I'm very happy to share my experiences with you. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them. Jazakallah khair for listening. Assalamu alaikum.
All right, thank you guys so much. Right now, we're going to move into the panel session. So that how it works is you scan the QR code, or you raise your hand and you ask your question, and then I'll say it for you guys, and then you guys each take a turn. All right. So the first question is, what is the best way to find doctors or physician assistants to shadow?
I think the most convenient way is if you have any family, friends, or family that is a healthcare provider, that's a great starting point. I know some facilities may have a list of providers that you can shadow, or even just reaching out to local organizations to see if they can put you in touch with someone.
When I was at Berkeley, they had, mashallah, they had a mentorship program over there. And so I was able to shadow a ER doctor that used to work in Castro Valley. I think these days, I think a lot of the schools may not have those programs. So I think just like Sister said, it's best to find family or friends. I've been very blessed to have a lot of the youth in our community that have asked to come and be with me. And I've mentored several of them. Some of them have gone on to med school or dental schools, etc. So I would think that's probably a really good suggestion, is to reach out to the members in the community who can help you out, inshallah.
Can you hear me? So when I was looking for providers to shadow, I Googled internists in Bay Area, and I started to call them, and that was not successful. It was like a lot of calls, no real answer. Just reaching out to, again, family and friends, and just seeing if they've shadowed anybody, or if they, and then also to your primary care provider. So I know that a lot of groups, like at least for PAMF and Sutter Health, will have a program where, yes, you can shadow even El Camino. Reaching out to volunteer offices at some locations, so El Camino, and then just building contacts through volunteer work, reaching out to the doctors and just asking them if you can shadow. I think most providers will be more than happy to have you help them and shadow.
All right, so our next question is, how did you deal with the financial burdens of med school or PA school?
Emoji, let's put it like that, and one emoji, like the cringe emoji, or the stressed out face emoji. Depending on what program you choose to go to, medical or PA school or dental, whatever avenue it is, some schools offer scholarships, however, some don't. A lot of students get stuck with student loans or student debt, but I think that just comes with the profession. You know, inshallah, you will all be making good salaries and things like that that will allow you to pay back your student loans. But if you can find any type of repayment programs with your school, or even depending on certain scholarship opportunities, they may offer you some type of, what is it called, like the NHS programs, where you can, yeah, where you can work with them for a certain amount of years in a rural or low income community, and they will pay back for your school to a certain amount. So that's a very good opportunity that some people take advantage of.
Yeah, I think basically those are really good suggestions. I think the military is another option. So if you want to join the Navy, for example, or Army, there's a payback. Normally, I think it's a year for year, maybe it's 2 years for one, I'm not sure. But that was certainly an option back then. And loans were the other way that a lot of people got through school.
But I think even joining the military, going in at your profession, you go in at a pretty high rank too. So you do have that kind of upper hand when it comes to that.
All right, so our next question, I think, is specific to Amani. What is it like with working with athletes?
So it can be very fun or challenging. I'm not very sports oriented, so I don't know what fumble or interception or any of these words really mean. But if you are sports oriented, it can be really fun. It is very hands-on. So if you think of yourself as either a mechanic or a handyman, you are helping build someone or repair them. So it can be really helpful in that sense, if you would want to look at it that way. But I found it very fun. I very much like the procedures, the surgeries. We did ACLs, we did knee replacements, which I found very fun, ankle surgeries, and so you're very much finding pieces that fit into a puzzle. So if you like problem solving, quick thinking, things of that nature, then ortho's a very good field, but it's very anatomy oriented too, so you have to know your anatomy very well.
We also get a few high-profile athletes in our practice, and we take care of them. I obviously only have very limited exposure to them. I say, hello, how are you? Go over their medical history, and off to sleep they go, and that's pretty much my interaction. My one joke that I tell is that I've done some of these MMA fighters who are really very elite, and they were undefeated. I said, you ever been knocked out? And they said, no, and they're like 11-0. I said, well, meet your first knockout. So I knock them out and gave them their first one. So anyway.
Okay, so our next question, we know that both of you guys in the professions, you guys work insane hours. What were your early work hours like when you started training in your career?
So when I first started my intern year, it was different based on my different rotations. I think that the wards were the most challenging. ICU was challenging. ICU was really insane hours where we were working 28 hours. The only resident there, no fellows. If you had a problem, you have to wake up the attending, which is a very scary thing. And even though they say, oh, wake us up if anything, they don't really mean it. And then you have 7 patients to take care of, and you're doing new admits. And 28 hours, sometimes you're not sleeping 28 hours. So I think that all of that has changed now when people started to talk about it, and insane resident hours and mental health, became a thing after COVID. They changed all of that. So hopefully nobody has to go through that. But yeah, I think that's the insane. Those are the most insane hours that I had. And then when you go home, you sleep, but you also have to prepare for a presentation the next day, which is 7 a.m. around to 6 p.m. that you're there. And then again, you go back to that 28 hours the following day. And then you get like 1 day a week off, 1 week. And then 1 week you have no weekend. And so you alternate your weekends with 1 day off. Wards are a little bit better. They tried to compensate with ICU and then do clinic, which is more like 9 to 5. And the wards are a little bit better, which is like 12 hours. Those are my insane hours.
Yeah, it was pretty busy during residency and all of that. And this was before work-life balance was even a word back then. And I can tell you, when I was doing my medicine residency, we would do every third night call, which means we're there the whole time. We're awake for 36, 38 hours. Then we go home and then come back the next day, work again, etc. And one night it was Ramadan, and we lived close to the hospital. So my wife and I dropped me off a sandwich that I could eat for suhoor. And because obviously the cafeteria is not open at 4 in the morning, so I couldn't go get anything over there. And so one night I was carrying the code pager, and there was a code at 2 in the morning. All right, so we went to that, and I said, okay, now I'll go back and eat my sandwich. There's another code. So 3 codes in succession, and the time for suhoor went away, and the sandwich was still in my pocket. So those are the things that happened during that. But interestingly, even before all this work-life balance, when I finished, when I got into med school, I told myself basically I'm going to have my priority in my life. And my priority was my dean, number 1, 2 was my health, and then 3rd would be my work and family after that. So you have to figure out what's important to you. And so figure out a balance and keep yourself healthy, because it doesn't help anybody if one becomes sick or ill or out of shape or whatever it is. So it's really important to maintain yourself. And I've been doing all this for many, many years and not had any of these issues, anxiety and all these kinds of things that people are depression and all that stuff. I blessed, alhamdulillah. So that's all really very important to maintain all that balance.
When it came to my training and my rotations, we did 10 rotations and we did our 2 electives. It was really variable. Depending on what specialty you're on, it can be either crazy or it can be very laid back. My general surgery rotations were very crazy. I would have to round on my patients before the resident even got there to round on his patients, and then before the attending even got there to round on their patients. So I'd get there around 2 a.m., and then we would leave around 7 in the evening, depending on how the chief was feeling that day. And then if I was on ENT, it was very laid back. Go in at 10 a.m., leave at 3, have an hour for lunch. So it really just depends on the specialty. But just know that everyone in your class is going through the same thing as you. So that's going to be your biggest support too. Always asking for help if they have any pointers, anything that they can suggest. But I think you made a really good point. Taking care of yourself and putting your priorities first is the best way to manage things.
So the next question, what's the best advice you would give to someone just starting the med school or PA school application process?
So for me, my med school, I did not go to med school. My PA school application process, I completed it over the summer. The cycle opens up the year before you start the program. I got all of my patient contact hours through volunteering in that clinic. I was also a scribe in the emergency room. So those were good things to add, but just making sure that you have everything organized so that when you start your application process, you're not scrambling, trying to find things in. Various programs or schools have different requirements. Some places have rolling admission, meaning the sooner you get your application in, the sooner you may hear from them. So if you are really shooting for a specific school, that's just something to keep in mind. And also just don't be disappointed. I applied to 12 or 13 schools and I only heard back from 4. I even heard back from one of them after I was a year into my program. So just know that these things can happen. You won't hear from everyone, but just try to make yourself stand out. Try to get as unique, well-rounded experience as you can. Try to volunteer as much as you can, and just kind of spice up your resume a little bit, and your application as well.
The only thing to add to that is that if you have seniors, it's going to be good to kind of talk to them what they did to get into med school, and it's helpful to know, what their path was and to try to, do something similar along the line.
Okay. Okay, so this is related to the application process. Other than obtaining your patient care hours, what did you do to gain your volunteer or community service hours?
So volunteering in college, I was in a medical honor society, so we got various experiences from that. We would have guest lectures of different providers in the area come and speak about their experiences and how their practices are. We would help organize different 5Ks in the area, things of that nature. But I was very involved with an organization called Helping Hands. I helped organize a Syrian refugee clothing drive, which I really tried to highlight on my application during the Syrian crisis, which was also very eye-opening for a lot of people in the South that don't know much about Middle Eastern people and the culture and things that happen around the world outside of CNN. So just things to kind of note. As what else besides that? Just trying to do unique things. Just try to stand out. Everyone gets their patient contact hours somehow or volunteering, but if there's something that you're really passionate about, animals, humanitarian work, healthcare, food, things like that, just try to kind of niche into that topic and kind of use that as a selling point too. That might be helpful.
I didn't go to medical school here, but I think that there are students that come and try to just shadow around and yeah, but I wouldn't be very helpful in as
And neither would I. We didn't require volunteer hours back then. So
Okay. This is still related to application process. How did you choose which place to apply for?
So I'm first generation college. I'm the first healthcare in my family. So I really wanted to stay close to home. So depending on kind of how your family dynamics are, that's something to take into consideration. I had a school that was near where I lived, but I was not accepted to that program. And so I had to go out of state. So that can be challenging. But as long as you have supportive family and you can try to work something out, even if it's your mom or your dad come and live with you for a little while to help, if that's an option too, but also just not giving up. It's okay if you don't get into the place that you want to, and you may have to wait a little bit longer due to whatever your situations are. But just being patient with yourself and respectful of your parents because they know what's best for you, even if your 18-year-old self doesn't think that at the time, you will come to appreciate that later on in life.
I think for me, basically, it was applying to all the California schools back then. And then I looked at out-of-state schools that were private schools because they would take out-of-state students. Whereas out-of-state public schools, for example, Minnesota or some of these places, they wouldn't take very many out-of-state students. The tuition is certainly higher if you go to a private school. And so the one I went to was the private school, and I had to borrow money in order to get through it. But that's one of the hurdles we have to overcome. And then certainly I think there's so much information now out there about each of these medical schools, what kind of students they're looking for, what their profile is, and you can read all this stuff online, which we didn't have access to back then. And then basically see which one fits well for you. And you can then write your application, your essay, inshallah, to get their attention and be able to get in over there.
I think another thing to add to that too is depending on where you live, I know California has a lot more programs than other states do. Where I went to school, there was only 2 in the entire state. California has probably tons more. So just kind of thinking about where you are, you made some good points too about looking into the other schools and trying to see how you can fit in there as well. A lot of the out-of-state schools have a certain percentage of students that they take from out of state. My class size was 40, and they only accepted 10 students from out of state. So that's just things to keep in mind. So if you are applying to out of state, just kind of be aware of your chances and how to improve your application and stand out.
I have a question for you, actually. We know that it's very expensive to go to school here in the States, and you went to school out of states. Do you suggest going your route and taking the extra exams to come back, or what do you think?
So I feel like I did take a shortcut, and I don't have a lot of student loans, so in that way it was helpful. But it's a lot easier if you go to school here, and I had to apply to a lot of programs, about 162 programs, just to get to stand the same chance. So I think that and then the training here, I went to but I did residency, and then I I was working with medical students and interns and American grads from here. So I did feel like, it's worth it, going to school here. So I guess if it's my kids, I would probably encourage them to go to school here.
If I can add to that a little bit, there's definitely a bias. I think that if you go to school here, your chances of getting a residency and all of that's definitely improved. Most of the residency programs prefer U.S. graduates or Canadian graduates or, England or some of these schools that are comparable, whereas coming from India or Pakistan or some of these places, they will look at you only if you're exceptional, you've done something really great, or you've got a great letter of recommendation from some professor or somebody that they know, or you're connected somehow. So those are the things that will help you get in. But for the most part, it's worth it to stay here, even though you feel like you might save a year or two, have less financial burden. But I think the quality of the education is much better here. The resources are better. The interaction you have with your colleagues, all of that stuff is really good. And I think it's really important when you're going through all the studies and the cadaver lab and the physiology, the histology lab, and having all the availability to look at all these slides and having the microscopes and everything else, which they may not have in some of these other places.
Okay, thank you. And then the next question, this might be personal, so if you want to give a range, go ahead. How much do you earn per year?
So, as an internal medicine physician starting out, I think the range is very variable. It's between 200 to 300. And then as you become established and then you have a few years of experience, then it can go up. And sometimes people, the way that there are different models of earnings, it also varies. Sometimes it's like, oh, if you meet this criteria, which is everybody, 80% of your patients need to have well-controlled diabetes, then you get a bonus. And sometimes some models work with, per patient that you see. So that way it can change a little bit, but then, yeah, after 2 years or being a little bit more established, I can go up.
So it really just depends. As a PA, most providers will make around 100,000 starting off, depending on your specialty. Some less, some more. But that's how a lot of PAs start, with little to no experience. That's typically where we start off. There's a lot of room to grow in that, depending on whether you work full-time, part-time. A lot of the more demanding specialties, you will have a higher salary, but just kind of the trade-off of maybe your work-life balance might not be as how you want it to be. But in orthopedic sports medicine, starting off, a lot of people will make around 115,000 in that range, and there's always room to grow moving upwards.
So I wouldn't go into medicine to make money. You can certainly do a startup and make a lot more money a lot faster. So that I'll preface my comment about salaries with that. Basically, anesthesiologists are, if you Google them, they're probably one of the highest paid specialties. In the last couple of years, it's just gone astronomical. And part of the problem is that there's a real shortage of anesthesia providers. And the groups and all of them are paying a lot of money to bring them in. The range is different based on what kind of work you do. If you're academic, you make less, probably in the 300, 400 range. If you're in private practice, you make more than that. It just depends on how hard one wants to work, hustle. If you work in a hospital setting, you take a lot of call, do a lot of nights, a lot of weekends, and there's all these young guys coming out. They want to do that. But all I can say is that if you go into medicine, in most parts of the country, you're going to be comfortable. Your salary will be comfortable. Here in the Bay Area, I feel like I'm poor compared to all these, startup zillionaires that are out there. But alhamdulillah, I've had a good career, so no discouragement there.
Okay, thank you. And then these two questions are about gap years. Does taking a gap year look bad on applications? Yes, can answer.
So I, between graduating medical school and starting residency, I had a 2 years gap, and there are programs that look in that, but it's important to kind of fill those gaps up with something that shows that you were still interested in doing something. And sometimes you could just put in random volunteer work. Just say I was studying for my boards, and that will be okay as long as it looks like something was there.
So I graduated college on a Friday and started my program on a Monday. So I tried not to take a gap year, but it really just depends. I think you said filling it with work or something that you can, show that you did something productive with your time. But a lot of these programs and things like that are aware that life things happen. It's okay if you feel comfortable sharing with the committee teams, that these things were circumstances in my life where, my career and education is important to me, but you have different priorities. So I think that's important to address if you can. But a lot of times being patient with yourself, and if you don't get in the first time, that's okay. If you take a gap year for a reason, that's okay, but just be prepared that you may have a question come up during an interview.
I would agree. I think a gap year without any meaning or purposes definitely doesn't look good on your record. But you may have a lot of reasons to take a year off, and it may be to go serve in the Peace Corps, for example, in Africa, or to take care of some family member, parent, or somebody who's ill and has some disease, and you're the only care provider that's there. So I think those are all exceptions to that. That maybe, or you're involved in some research project, or you got a job that was really good and you want to try it out for a while. So as long as you have a legitimate reason for why you took a year off, I think it doesn't look bad on your record. So.
But I agree that it's important to, kind of justify that why you had the gap year, because now even when I was part of like hiring, and then my superior was like, oh, but they didn't complete residency in time. I wonder why. Let's, not look at this application. So it's very competitive out there. So I think as long as you put it there why you had a gap year, that's helpful.
Traveling count? Traveling? Don't really travel.
For a full year, maybe not.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, the next question for an international medical graduate who's an older graduate. What things do you need to do to stand out and overcome the red flag of gap years?
So I think that it's been some time since you've graduated. Just trying to get better grades on your USMLE, and then doing step 3. So that also counts. It's really, the few years prior to applying for residency that counts more than the gap from medical school till residency application. So if you can justify like the 3 years where you did a lot of observerships, clerkships, you have a lot of clinical experience, I think that's good enough.
And then what are some career paths that I can take if I don't want to go into medical school or PA school?
It really depends on what you're interested in. If you are interested in medicine but don't want to be a doctor or a PA or a nurse practitioner or whatever it may be, there's research opportunities. There's always new, exciting scientific discoveries coming. Other things such as academics, that's a very needed profession as well. You can go into academics, you can teach different subjects that may be helpful. You can teach anatomy classes. That was a very interesting course that I took in PA school. Our teacher was not a doctor, but she had studied anatomy for many, many years. So it really just depends on what you're passionate about, what you're interested in. There's other avenues than just being a doctor, PA, nurse practitioner, but just know you will be just as needed and just as important as everyone else on the team.
I think there are other healthcare opportunities if you don't want to go the long route of PA or med school or any of these things, and you still want to be involved in the healthcare environment. Some jobs that are basically, there's always opportunities in these fields, is to be like an X-ray tech is a great opportunity, or be a respiratory therapist. These take about 2 years after high school. They don't require a bachelor's degree. So if you feel like, you want to do other things with your life rather than spend 6, 8, 10, 12 years trying to become a physician or whatever, then this is another alternative that you can go another route. And I had always thought when I was applying that what if I don't get into med school? Well, then research is another really great. My physiology major would have been great. You can do research. You can also teach biology at a high school or get a PhD and teach at a college level. So those are other options that one should always have those backup plans ready in case med school or PA school doesn't work out.
And then this question had the most likes, and I missed it. I'm sorry, guys. This one says, "Did you work during med school?"
So I interestingly, I had during my 4th year of med school, our school had a program with the hospital about 30 miles away. And again, it was giving up, sleep and nights and stuff like that to go and work over there. So they had a program where we as 4th year med students would go to this hospital and work in the ICU as a nurse. And so I did that for about 6 or 8 months and learned how to do nursing care for patients. At the same time, what they wanted was for us to teach the nurses all about cardiac physiology, about EKGs, and all that. As 4th year med students, we've learned a little bit by then. And so we're able to teach the nurses and help them manage some of these patients. So it was a symbiotic relationship. I learned something, they learned something, and I got paid a little bit of money in order to go and give up my sleep and work over there. And then in the summer, I also did some stuff during my 1st and 2nd year. I did some medical rotations that were being paid here in San Francisco. So I did that. So I got some stipend for doing that. But for the most part, not a full-time job during med school.
Neither was I. It was just the schedule was too hectic, and a lot of programs will not allow you to work just because your school should be your work at that time. But it can be a financial burden on a lot of people. So if you do have the opportunity now to save money if you can or work, then that could be a good option to kind of help lessen that financial burden of going to school.
Okay, thank you. So it looks like you guys don't have any more questions, but I have one more. I know that both PAs and MDs require hours and hours of studying. What study skills did you use when you guys were learning?
So I think it really depends on everybody's studying style. I was more of a solo. Most of my friends were more like into group studying. I just combined the two, just keep it interesting.
It really depends on the type of learner that you are. Some schools may have like a student success program or some type of studying coordinator. I'm not sure what the professional name is, but they can be really, really helpful. If you need tutoring, some schools can offer that as well. If you are a group studier, that's another option. For me, I had to have like complete silence, couldn't even hear like a car drive by. Like, that's the type of person I was, but sometimes watching videos can be helpful. If you're a visual learner, color coding things can be helpful. Studying with someone else can sometimes be helpful. So just kind of finding out what studier or what type of learner you are can be helpful. It may take a little bit of time to try to figure that out. So you might struggle with a test or two, but that's okay. Just kind of figuring out what you can do better on the next one.
If I can add, not only learning what kind of studying or learning you can do, but perhaps figuring out your biology clock, when you learn best. And so I was really not a very good student when I was in high school, even though I managed to get by and I got into Berkeley. But really my first year at Berkeley was my eye-opener. I was very fortunate. I roomed with two Muslim brothers who were like junior and senior at Berkeley in engineering programs. And we had a 2-bedroom apartment, so I was able to share the apartment with them. And they were unbelievable students. And they were there to study. And we had really very little distractions, very little time to do anything else. There was no really outside any interest of that sort. And for me, this was my life. I had to make it or break it. I had to get into med school. And so weekends, we'd get up at usual Fajr time, have breakfast, and 7:30, hit the books and do that for about 4 hours. Eat lunch, maybe take a nap, and then hit it again for 4 or 5 hours again. So 8-10 hours every Saturday, every Sunday. Weeknights would be the same kind of thing after you get home from classes, same thing. So figure out whether, morning is good for you. My next door roommate, my next door neighbor at med school, this guy he would study till like 2, 3 in the morning. And I knew that because he was always late for class at med school. We was only 108 of us there. So you'd always see him walk in at 10 o'clock. I said, Gary, what's up with you, man? He said, well, I don't go to bed till 2 or 3 in the morning. And he stays up late and he studies. And he did really well. So all the lectures were taped, so he could always go back and listen to the lectures from 8 to 10. He never missed anything. But that was just his biological clock. So figure out what works best for you, what time of day that you absorb and learn the best, and you're most focused and least distractions.
Also, I had a professor that was she had aced everything in her college years, med school years. So she taught us this new method of learning, where she would solve questions and then based on the answers, like she'd pick a topic, and then she'd solve all the questions related to that topic, and then she would build this diagram or this flow chart in her brain. And whatever she's taught us has just always been imprinted in my brain. So I just feel like that's a great method of learning.
Not an easy task, the esteemed speaker was saying. So I'd love to hear from the speakers a little bit about motivation going into it, and whether you feel that if you don't have that internal motivation and others are pushing you into perhaps going into medicine or a field within medicine, if at the end of the day the sacrifice is worth it.
So for me, again, I always looked at the medical field as a very leadership role, and I always imagined myself into it. But if I didn't want to, I think it would be very hard to, and I think that's where most of the mental health issues come out from, because this profession demands so much from you. It really demands 100% off you during training, during med school. That if somebody's not into it, their heart's not into it, it could really have a great financial, mental, a lot of burden on you.
I would definitely say the biggest you would have to find out what your motivation is. It's something that will keep you going at times, even when you want to quit. Like, I can't even tell you how many times I was like, you know what, I'm done. You just get to a point where you feel like you've studied so much, you've exhausted so much, you're not eating, you're not sleeping, you're just tired, you're exhausted. And you have to find out what motivates you to keep going. For me, family was a huge motivator. I'm first generation college. Everyone in my family just told me, if you have to be passionate about what you do for work, or else it's not going to be worth it. You're going to be putting yourself through unnecessary stress and things like that. You have to be passionate about what you do. You have to be happy to wake up in the morning to go to your job, because you could carry that negative energy to your patients or to your colleagues. And so I think that's a very, important thing to think about. But just really finding out your motivation. Just be prepared. You will miss out on things in life. Due to your sacrifices in school. You may not get to go to someone's wedding. You might not get to go to this party or this whatever. You just have to just know that in these times of school and things like that, you will have loved ones pass away. You will have, issues that will come up. Just be prepared. You have a support system. Lean on whoever is most supportive. Family, seeking, mental health professionals if you need to. Because you have to take care of yourself first before you can take care of anyone else.
Maybe Marcus Welby is a good motivator. So for any of you who know, this was an old family-style doctor TV show that used to be run in the 60s. And not that he was my motivator, but that's a really good point that you raised. It has to be, I think, it has to be self-motivation, has to be the number one factor. If one is not, and that's what I tell a lot of these students that come and shadow me, that I said, this is really something that you want to do, that's great. But if it's not, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of sacrifice, a lot of weddings, parties that you miss out on, a lot of family stuff. a lot of self-denial, a lot of delayed gratification. So you raise a really good point. And I think along the lines of all of those things is that the family needs to support you and to be there and to say, this is really important that you finish this and to do that. But I think to be pushed into it or to do it because your parents or your spouse wants you to do it, I think that's the wrong motivation. And it's going to lead to problems later on, in my opinion.
So we got 2 new questions. I hope you guys don't mind. Did you have a good work-life balance when you were in med school or PA school?
My balance was wake up, go to school, come home, study, eat, study, go to sleep, wake up, do the same thing for 2.5 years. Yeah.
Actually, I did. I had a pretty good work-life balance, study life, and some of my classmates were into some sports, and so we'd always manage every day. Either I'd go play racquetball with them for a couple hours, or I'd go for a run myself, or do something almost on a daily basis. And I continue that habit now. So almost every day, every other day, doing something, riding my bike, or go for a walk, or do something of that sort, in order to keep that balance, keep that stress-free life. Alhamdulillah. So.
One thing to add though, and I learned it a little bit later on in my school and my program, is you need to have something that takes you away from the classroom, a de-stressor. Because if you're constantly studying in the books, you're not going to enjoy your life. And you should still enjoy your life even if you're in school and suffering, but you should suffer in a happy way, with fun things to kind of break up the monotony throughout the day, whether it's exercising, which can be a great stress reliever, sometimes even studying better after working out. That can be a thing. Talking with family, if you have pets, those are good ways to de-stress.
I just listened to a podcast on these guys that everybody has a different goal in life, right? So here are these guys, they're mountain climbers. And I don't know if you've ever heard this on NPR radio, but these 2 guys, they climb like Mount Rainier. And it's just the most treacherous. And you say, like, what is it? After I listened, I said, what motivates these guys to go and climb that? One of them died actually during one of these climbs because it's so snowy and icy, and they have these false covers, and they have these huge deep crevices in the mountains, which I never knew existed. So you have to figure out what is the mountain that you're trying to climb. What is it that's motivating you? At the same time, you have to find things to help take away the stress while you're climbing the mountain. Take a break from it, get away from it so that you can get back into it.
And then this is a good ending question. What is a question we were supposed to ask you, but we didn't? We forgot.
Yeah. My favorite question also at the end of every interview is, if you had a chance, would you do it again? And my answer is yes.
I want to say, alhamdulillah, this was a really great session. I feel really honored to be here with my guests here and other speakers and all of you, and for being invited. And I make dua for all of our youngsters. May Allah guide them, inshallah, to the path that's best for them, and to a career that's successful and helpful to the Muslim community, but to the world community at large. And if you're service-oriented and you want to take care and help people, then healthcare is your field. If you're into other motivating factors, then find your path there, please.
Jazakallah khair. Round of applause, everyone. Thank you guys so much for coming. If you guys have any questions, you can email it to us. It's youth@mcabayarea.org, and then we'll forward it to them. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for coming.